Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts. Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
The time has come for us to join a global heart that's made of you and me. Oh, the river, come and flow through me. Oh, sweet river, peaceful river, come on and flow through me. Oh, come on and lift me, hold me, carry me home. Sacred water, inform me, carry me home. Come on and lift me, hold me, carry me home, right to the river. Sacred water, inform me, carry me home. Carry me home. Carry me home. Yeah, Carry me home. Carry me home. Carry me home.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you, Stephanie Bland. Thank you, Unity Choir and Band. Well, it's almost time to end the service. And I've got a 45-minute sermon, so no. Some of you have it's a nervous laughter. He's kidding, right? I want to welcome our Uniteens and YFMs. They're in the service with us today. Thank you guys for being with us. So we tried to plan a service that would be engaging to the 5th through 12th graders as well. So are you enjoying yourselves as well? It's a beautiful service, celebration of our diversity. Philip was walking home with his mom from church one Sunday, and there was a little bit of light rain, and she said, "Philip, look, there's a rainbow. God's painted a picture for us today." And he said, "Oh, it is, and God did it with his left hand." And she said, What? She said, "Well, I learned today in Sunday school that Jesus sits on his right one." For those of you who are not raised in traditional Sunday school, we're often taught Jesus sits on the right hand of the Father. You got it? Okay. The understanding changes as we grow, does it not? And the way we approach spiritual principle changes as we evolve. And in Unity, we teach that we are eternally evolving expressions of God's own light and love. We're never going to learn it all. We're always going to be revealing and receiving more of the good that God is. So that song, River of Life, I asked the choir to sing that one day. My buddy Larry Steelman wrote that in. He's for the community at the Center for Spiritual Living in Oakland, California, their choir. And the idea that there is this eternal flow of divine love and creativity that moves through us. And I love that. It's really what our teaching says, that we are expressions of God's own givingness and energy and creative power. But I also love the idea that we are the river. And if you think about the old idea that you could never step in a river twice, the same river twice, because the water that you stepped into this time has gone on down the road, the river. And our church is kind of like that too, that we today, those of us who've gathered here today, we are the river of Unity of Houston that is moving through it. We are not the ones who opened this community. We're not the ones who will be here down the road. But today, we are that river. And our community, Unity, if you think about this too, the river will look the same from generation to generation, but there will still be an evolution there too. The riverbed will move and it will shift over time. And so what I've come to understand as we celebrate our generations, and this is the third year we've done this particular service, is that we must be true to our teaching and true to who we are as Unity, and we must evolve. So, as I was thinking about having our young ones in the service today, I wanted to bring something in the message that might be engaging, and I love stories. So I was thinking about what Bible story, what story from our collective is out there that might want to come in, and nothing was dropping in. And so finally what I realized is I want to tell you our story, the story of Unity. This church actually has its charter, I think 1952. Reverends Dale and Min Newsom, they founded this church. But what you may not realize is that they incorporated into that original chartered group an earlier group that had been studying Unity principles since 1919. There was a young housewife from Kansas. She and her family had relocated to Houston on Rutland Avenue in the Heights. And she had been studying Unity principles. And she continued her studies through correspondence courses. And she decided that she was just going to go around and ask her neighbors if they would come into her living room there on Rutland in the Heights and study these principles. And we actually count that as the birth of this community 100 years ago next year, sitting in Bertha's living room. What is it that is Unity that we keep coming back to generation after generation? We'll give you a little bit more of our story. Myrtle and Charles Fillmore were a young married couple, and both having health problems, and they had been looking for some spiritual solution. And Myrtle sat in a lecture, E.B. Weeks, do I have that right? Who was a metaphysical healer. And Myrtle latched on to this idea that by working with spiritual principles, she could heal her body. And she began this practice of speaking life to the energy centers in her body. Charles also experienced physical healing. And they began to study. It was a brand new movement. Something happened in this country in the late 1800s. It's often called the Great Spiritual Awakening, but it birthed many movements. The Pentecostal movement, of which I'm also a graduate, it was launched in that same time. There was also the spiritualist movement. Up in upstate New York, there's still a group there that have a spiritual teaching, and they communicate with those who have crossed over the threshold from this life. Other great movements began at that time, but our movement came out of this idea that what if we took the teachings of Jesus literally? Like when Jesus said, if you have faith, maybe not literally, but the full power of it, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. What if that were true? What if that when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is neither here nor there, but within you? What if that were true? And they began a study of really a lot of the ancient truths. We're part of the New Thought movement. That was what happened in those late years. But some people, I think Michael Beckwith coined the phrase New Thought, Ancient Wisdom. Really, the truths that we teach in Unity have been around for centuries, taught in different places. But the idea that we can work with the laws of the universe to move with that river of divine flow, to channel the creative energy that God is forever living and pouring forth, and we can actually create the life of our dreams. We can live the life of wholeness that we know we're called to, and they began to practice and to teach and to write, and our movement was born. They studied with a woman named Emma Curtis Hopkins. She was a protege of Mary Baker Eddy, who founded the Christian Science movement. And Emma was called the mother of New Thought. She taught all of the founders of the different groups in New Thought. And she had a quote that I love. She said, "There is good in this universe for me, and I ought to have it." Repeat after me. There is good in this universe for me, and I ought to have it. Does that feel right to you? Yes. Then you're in the right church. Because we teach abundance, health, prosperity, love, that we are here to live the life abundant that Jesus taught us. And we do so by working with spiritual principles and laws, by retraining our mind, which is also scriptural. Romans 12:2, if be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's our work. And so we do it as we've always done it, and yet differently. One of the ways that we're evolving as a teaching is that in previous civil rights movement, Unity kind of stood on the sidelines, said, well, we're just really about the personal experience and personal spiritual responsibility. We're not going to get involved in those controversial issues. And that was not in keeping with our spiritual principle. And there was a few years ago at Unity Village, there was an apology made to African Americans because of the lack of right standing that we had taken at different times in our history. And we're called today to be awake and alive as a spiritual movement and to bring our teaching to bear in the world. I'm thinking, too, about the generations as they move through. We celebrated a couple of weeks ago some of the folks in our community who have been serving here for 40 years in volunteering. And I think about Ruth Street, who looks like near the end of her amazing journey in this life. 2 years ago, she stood on this platform and told about how this community has changed and shaped her. And it was on her 90th birthday. And I think about those of us who are in the Hindu tradition. There are 4 stages of life. There is the student, there is the householder, there is the hermit, and there is the ascetic. And each one of those is a way of taking up and letting go of the things of this earthly world. And I think about those of us who are in the householders of this church, those of us who are giving of our time and our resources to make sure that it stays healthy now while we're able, so that we can hand it off. And then we have to think about, who are we handing it off to? It's you guys. Tanette, would you come up here? A few weeks ago, I got an email from this beautiful young man, and he said, you know, there are no young adults in your church. I have something on my heart that I want to talk to you about that. So what's in your heart about that, Tanette?
I feel like young people need a platform to really just express how they feel, because sometimes there's a disconnect where, like especially with technology, we feel like we have friends, but really it's not really intimate. There's no one-on-one connection, and I feel that Unity could be a space where young people can just come and express how they feel, because it works. Because when two sad people are together, at least there's some love, there's some support.
There's a connection.
So that we don't have to be sad alone. And being sad alone is what spirals these young people to do the drugs, to get suicidal, but for us to express it in a community that's supportive and not forceful is what I needed whenever I was going through depression and drug abuse, and I really didn't fit the societal mold, and luckily I'm still here.
You're still here
to be here.
Yeah. One of the things, they love you, and they should. One of the things that you said in the last service really stayed with me, that you talked about that there's an idea that the old idea of being strong is to be silent, and there's something new coming through in this generation. What do you see about that?
Yes, because especially being a male in this culture right now, we're forced to almost not feel as much and to just be strong. But that's the weakness that's like that. For us to really be ourselves, we have to feel. And for us to feel, we have to have some support. Sometimes it's hard to just sit there and cry alone, but when we go out into the world, pretend we're strong. And having men and women come together and just feel together and not be ashamed of what we feel and to just be vulnerable, be transparent is what really got me here and got me talking to you in the first place.
And that's true strength. Thank you, Tanette. Thank you so much. Perfect. My heart has been broken since Friday morning. In February, I was on a little vacation. I was on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and I got an alert on my phone that there had been a shooting at the Parkland High School, 20 miles from where I was. On Friday, I was getting ready to go to Dallas to celebrate the installation of a friend of mine in her new church, and I got an alert on my phone that said their shooting had happened 25 miles away, right here in Santa Fe. We are being asked to wake up. The first thing I did was I called the office and I said, I'll write a prayer. We'll put it on Facebook. And the prayer was for those affected, but it's also for wisdom for those of us who are in charge with protecting our young. And that's all of us. And several people, rightly so, posted on Facebook, enough prayers, we need action. We have to change something. It can't just be thoughts and prayers. Well, I'm going to tell you that we are a church and there will never be enough prayer. But the prayer at some point has to change from peace and safety to what is mine to do. Now, I am a citizen of the United States and of Harris County, Texas, and I vote and I have opinions on what we should do in the human realm to right some problems. I'm not going to give you my opinions today, but I have them. And I probably agree with some of you and disagree with others. And I know that my opinions are not all the right ones. But what I am going to tell you as your spiritual leader today is that we are responsible not only for our experience, but for the collective. That there is something for us to do in the way we love each other. And regardless of what we think about guns or locks on the doors at the schools, we can all agree that our job is to protect our young people. And so we're here for you. We love you. And you're safe. This week there was another story that made the news. It was, you may have seen it, it was in New York at a deli. Two people were in line. They were speaking Spanish to each other, and they came up to the front. The person working there started speaking Spanish to them. And somebody else just kind of blew up. This is America. We don't do that here. What are you doing? It's kind of an ugly story. And then I saw what he was saying. I saw the protest to what he was saying. And what I got was that people are just shouting over each other. And nobody is hearing anything. So whatever your personal opinions are about what needs to happen with school safety, this shouting over each other is got to stop. We have to develop a listening. We have to develop a reverence. And we have to listen internally and externally. I've been talking a lot about the masculine and feminine energy of God, and we have to, before we take action in the world, we have to get clear. What is it that God is seeking to do through me at this time? What our young people are being asked to grow up into is different than what you and I grew up into. So that's the thing. Some things have got to be different now than they were when we were young. And what I want to tell you is that what these beautiful young people come equipped with is exactly what's needed. Scarlett Lewis and Alyssa Parker, they're two moms who were killed in the Sandy Hook shooting. It was only 6 years ago. It seems like forever. They have both started movements. One is the Jesse Lewis Choose Love Moment. Another is Alyssa started one called Safe and Sound Schools. We have to stop blaming and shouting, and we have to begin to live our oneness. In James chapter 2. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food, and if one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is anybody from my Bible people? Faith without works is dead. I would even say faith without works is not even faith. If we're living in the faith of our connection to God, it changes how we show up in the world. And that is what we're being called to. Ernest Holmes said, "Find me one person who is for something and against nothing, and I will show you a new Christ." Wow. You are called not to be against anybody, but to be for the truth that God wants to live as humankind on planet Earth in 2018, and you are called to protect our innocence. So, something is happening here. I've been saying that a lot. There is a tendency when we're hurting and scared to isolate. And what I'm discovering in the power of this community is that when we are hurting or scared, if we come together, we remind each other of the truth. Change is not only possible, it's inevitable. Candy Leitner was a young mom whose child was killed by a drunk driver. She founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Hundreds of thousands of lives saved by changing laws and by educating. We're being woken up. Maybe some of the solutions to keep our children safe are right here if we listen and we bring it. But God is here. Something is happening, and you're a part of it. God bless you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.